Imagine a plane that could take off from your backyard, land on a rocky mountain ledge, and fly slower than your car on a city street, all while refusing to stall or crash. Sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, right? Well, it's not. Meet the Helio Courier, the flying machine that defied physics and pushed the boundaries of aviation. From its daring missions in war zones to landing on tennis courts, this is the story of an aircraft so extraordinary, it didn't just rewrite the rulebook, it threw it out completely. In this video, we'll take you behind the scenes of the Helio Courier's incredible journey, from its groundbreaking design to its role in life-saving missions and daring military operations. You'll learn what made this aircraft a game-changer in aviation history, and we'll even share some exciting news about how this legendary plane might be making a comeback. Stay with us until the end to hear about the intriguing efforts underway to bring the Helio Courier back into the skies. To understand the genius behind the Helio Courier, we have to understand the man behind the machine. The Courier was the brainchild of Otto Koppen. Otto was no stranger to airplane design, having worked for the Ford Airplane Company. Yes, the same Ford that pioneered the Model T. Back in the day, Ford tried its hand at airplanes, and the young engineer Otto played a key role. Ford envisioned a Model T of the skies, so Otto created the Ford Flivver, a tiny airplane that could fit in your garage and take off from your backyard. What could go wrong? When Charles Lindbergh took the Flivver up for a quick spin, he called it the worst aircraft he ever flew. Ouch! A bit of a setback, but that didn't stop Otto, and he went on to become an accomplished professor at MIT, where he developed a special interest in the slow flight and safety. And that's really where the story of the Helio Courier begins. Like the Flivver, Otto wanted to create an airplane that anyone could fly, an airplane that was incredibly safe, and most importantly, an airplane that didn't need a massive runway to take off or land, or any runway for that matter. To kick things off, Otto teamed up with another professor from Harvard, Lynn Bollinger. Together, they bought a Piper Vagabond and it went straight to the chop shop where it would undergo a complete makeover. For starters, the wings were shortened. Then, full span slats were added to the front of the wings. Then, full-length flaps were added to the trailing edge. The landing gear was much taller and moved forward in the fuselage. A belt reduction allowed its small 4-cylinder engine to spin a massive 9-foot propeller, generating massive amounts of thrust for such a small plane. Their goal was simple: create a plane that could take off from just about anywhere. They tested their odd-looking plane in all sorts of unconventional places, including a tennis court at Harvard University. Let that sink in for a moment. And thus the helioplane was born, which laid the foundation of the Courier we know today. The helioplane was stall-proof and spin-proof. That's like inventing a car that can't crash. Driven by Lynn's business acumen, the helioplane was marketed as the plane to have in every garage. It was also heavily pitched to business executives who could fly directly from their office parking to golf courses. No helioplanes were sold in the way Otto and Lynn had envisioned, but they were determined to make this plane work. No turning back now. The helioplane was then enlarged to seat 4 people and was now powered with a 145 horsepower Continental, which also spun a large propeller. The Helioplane 4 remained a prototype, but set the stage for an improved version, the Courier. Now sporting a geared 260 horsepower Lycoming, the Helio Courier was the best of the bunch and by this time caught the eyes of both military and civilian operators. The military took notice of its impressive capabilities, especially its ability to take off and land in incredibly short distances. It was renamed the U-10 and used extensively during the Vietnam War. The Courier became famous for its role in flying into remote mountain airstrips, often landing in places where even helicopters would struggle. In fact, in one of its more unusual roles, the Helio Courier was fitted with loudspeakers and flown over Viet Cong positions. They'd drop pamphlets and broadcast messages encouraging enemy soldiers to surrender. These flights were pretty dangerous, as the planes took a lot of ground fire, but they got the job done. Around the same time, Helio was racking in civilian orders too. One of the very first civilian operators of the Helio Courier was Jungle Aviation and Radio Service, or JAARS, an organization that provided air support to Bible translators at remote locations around the world.
The JAARS, Helio Courier, claw their way into the beautiful Virginia skies.
At its peak, JAARS had up to 47 couriers flying in some of the most isolated locations on Earth. These planes could take off from fields as short as 600 feet, even when fully loaded. That's not a lot of runway, but it wasn't a problem for the Courier. Helio Couriers were used to bring in supplies, transport people, and sometimes even save lives in emergency situations. Although JAARS has mostly retired their Couriers, a couple are still used for pilot training. After all, if you can handle a Courier, you should be able to fly just about anything. What makes the Helio Courier so special? For starters, it can fly at speeds as low as 27 miles per hour. That's right, 27 miles per hour. That's slower than most cars on a residential street. And it won't stall. Instead, it will just float down like a heavy parachute, making it one of the safest airplanes ever built. In fact, it has the lowest post-crash fire rate of any aircraft produced. Yet another reason it was so popular in rugged, dangerous environments. What about takeoff? When lightly loaded, a Courier only needs about 150 feet to take off, roughly half the length of a football field. This is what makes the Courier the granddaddy of STOL airplanes. But it's not just about taking off and landing in tiny spaces. The Courier has some other tricks up its sleeve, especially how it handles turns. Most planes need a lot of space to make a turn, but the Helio Courier is different. It can make incredibly tight turns, giving it an advantage in rough terrain or crowded airspaces. It's almost like the plane was made for threading the needle through mountain valleys or jungle canyons. One of the more underrated aspects of the Helio Courier is just how much thought went into every part of its design. The wing is a work of art. It's hard to believe, but the wing profile is actually the same one used on the P-51 Mustang, the legendary World War II fighter. The leading edge of the Courier wing has two sets of slats that automatically deploy when the plane slows down, which helps create lift at low speeds. In fact, the slats improve lift by about 65%. That's a huge job for a small plane. Because the flaps take up so much room on the wing, the ailerons are almost square and look a bit like picnic tables. When they deploy at low speeds, special surfaces called interceptors pop up to create drag, which tightens the plane's turn radius even further. Add in the massive flaps that run almost the full length of the wing, and you've got a plane that can land slower than anything else its size. At the back, the Courier's tail features a huge rudder, which makes it very effective at low speeds. The horizontal tail is a stabilator, a single-piece horizontal tail surface that pivots to control pitch. The fuselage is long and sits low to the ground, making it easy to load cargo or passengers. The cabin can fit up to 6 people, or cargo. Safety was always top of mind for Otto, and that shows in the Courier's design. The seats can withstand an impact of 15 Gs, which means if the plane ever crashes, the passengers have a much better chance of walking away. Surrounding the cabin is a chromoly steel roll cage rated for 18 Gs. That's the kind of protection you'd expect in a race car, not a small aircraft. It's details like these that make the Courier one of the safest planes ever built. The cantilever landing gear on the Helio Courier is built like a tank. Its main gear absorbs high landing loads that would make other aircraft bounce back in the air. Its position far forward on the plane allows for heavy braking without tipping over. Under the hood, most Couriers are powered by a geared Lycoming engine, which means the engine runs at a higher RPM than the propeller. This allows the engine to turn faster for more power while keeping the propeller speed lower for efficiency. The engine cranks out 3,400 RPM at takeoff, but the prop is only turning at 2,200 RPM. It's a complex setup, but it works. The problem is the Lycoming G0480 is long out of production and parts are getting hard to obtain. This is one of the main reasons why many operators eventually moved on to other aircraft. As much as the Helio Courier is celebrated for its capabilities, the plane wasn't without its challenges. One of the biggest hurdles for pilots was learning to handle it on the ground. The Courier's landing gear is positioned far forward, making the distance between the main gear and the tail wheel quite long. This can make the plane tricky to operate on the ground, and many pilots, even experienced ones, have been known to ground loop the aircraft, basically spinning the plane out while landing or taxiing. Not fun at all. In the air, the Helio Courier is definitely a plane that takes some getting used to. New pilots often find it challenging at first, especially with how heavy the controls can feel while at low speeds. The Helio has been known to humble many high-time tailwheel pilots transitioning from other aircraft, but when flown with a deft hand, It will reward its pilot with performance no other plane can deliver. It's part of why it has such a loyal following among pilots who appreciate its unique capabilities. The Helio Courier didn't just shine on the land, it performed exceptionally well on skis and floats, which made it a popular choice for operations in places like Alaska and Canada. In fact, many bush pilots swear by the Helio Courier, saying there's no better plane for getting in and out of remote locations, especially in tough conditions. The Courier's ability to take off and land on water or snow only adds to its versatility, making it a true all-terrain airplane. Wherever you needed to go, the Courier could get you there. No fancy runways or large airports required. Over the years, the Helio Courier has gone through several different variants, each tailored for specific uses. One of the more interesting ones was the tri-gear version, which was designed for urban environments. This version was widely adopted by police departments, who used it for surveillance. A large camera mounted under the wing allowed police to monitor wide areas from the air, and the Courier's ability to fly slow and loiter over a scene for long periods made it an ideal platform for aerial observation. One of the rarer variants was the Twin Courier, a special twin-engine version built solely for the military. There's not a lot of information available about this version, and none of them have survived to this day. But from what we know, the Twin Courier was designed for high-stakes military missions where reliability and redundancy were crucial. Another interesting variant was the Stallion, a turboprop version which was inspired by the Courier, but was in fact a whole new design. It was one of the best performing STOL aircraft ever built. Sadly, very few of these were ever made. Most were lost in Southeast Asia, and only a few are still airworthy today. Helio stopped producing the Courier in the 1970s, but in the early 1980s, a new owner tried to revive the Courier and upgraded it with an 8-cylinder engine with 400 horsepower. Pilots found it to be too heavy, and as a result, not many were built. Which is a damn shame, as the 8-cylinder engine sounds so damn good. As time goes on, the Couriers have grown in age and have become costlier to maintain. As its fuel becomes rare around the world, so has the Courier. While many Couriers have been replaced by newer models like the Kodiak or the Pilatus Porter, nothing truly matches the Courier's combination of safety, performance, and ruggedness. It's a plane that was ahead of its time, and one that still holds a special place in the hearts of those who have flown it. The Courier also served as inspiration for a new generation of aircraft who also rely on high-lift devices on their wings to provide the same type of mind-blowing performance the Courier gave. While the last Courier left the production line well over 30 years ago, a small company in Alaska is working hard to revive the legendary airplane. With the type certificate and original drawings in hand, their goal is to build an even better Courier, while still maintaining the heart and soul of what makes the airplane beloved by so many. To this day, the ruggedness and flexibility of the Helio Courier's design remain largely unmatched. When you think about what it can do, taking off from a backyard, landing on a dirt patch, and flying slow enough to fly formation with helicopters, it's clear that Otto Koppen's little bird was something special.